Hey, I'm just like you, a second-year computer engineering student with a lot of ambition, and a bunch of rejection emails to prove it. Now, every company said the same thing. After careful consideration, we regret to inform, Meanwhile, my genius friend in University of Water is getting internships left, right, and center. He recently shook hands with Jensen Huang. He sat next to Elon Musk on his trip to Mars. Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to figure out why NPM start won't start. This is where I had a serious conversation with myself at 3 AM and I decided it's time to lock in. I'd like to introduce my new series, Behold, Road to FAANG. So for the first part of this series, I'll polish up my DSA skills. For my university, I learned DSA in C, so I would need to relearn them in Python. That'll be the first step of my journey. Throughout this series, I will explain the lessons that I learned. Alright then, here we go. For DSA, I decided to follow Master Greg's roadmap, and I chose Greg because other than the fact that he has a beautiful and wider vocal range than Ariana Grande.
Now and then, if we have any of the C not in the counter for C in balloon.
He does have one of the best courses. So here's the roadmap that I'll be following. It even says here, click here to crack into FAANG. Sounds like me. So I started off by getting familiar with how dynamic arrays and hash maps work on Python versus C, and I had some triggering revelations along the way. I decided to head straight into the array questions. So the first question I did was best time to buy and sell stock, where the question wants us to take the costs and find the highest profit you can sell it for with a value that occurs after it. So the idea I had was pretty simple. I'll iterate through it once to find the smallest number, and then I'll iterate from starting that smallest number and then find the biggest number afterwards. And it passed to the first 2 test cases, which I was very proud of, since this is my first ever official LeetCode question on my own, even though it's an easy. Then I checked Master Greg's solution just to make sure, and oh whoa. So pretty much my solution does not work for cases where you're supposed to buy, say, the second smallest value, and you're supposed to record the last profit value and only replace it if you find a bigger profit value than that. How does he do it? Next, I decided to try 2 medium questions. First one being product except self. After being stuck on it for an hour, I decided to see the answer, and my mind was blown as the solution is pretty clever, where you had to first make an array with the product of every element to the right, and then make another array with the product of every element to the left, and then multiply them with each other. And that was interesting because you pretty much have to use math and find like a strategy, like a mathematical strategy. Next, I tried spiral matrix, which and after being stuck on it for a bit less than an hour, I decided to see the answer and had a heart attack at first. Taking a closer look, it just pretty much looks like you make a cursor and you move around the matrix, or spiral around the matrix. Interesting. I decided that I feel like the issue is difficulty. I'm not used to medium questions in general, so I decided to move to Hashmaps and try questions there. First question I tried was an easy, max number of balloons. You give a string and then it'll find out how many times you can make the word balloon out of it, which sounds pretty straightforward. You just make a dictionary with the labels being each letter in the string, and the value is the amount of times that the letter is present. That's big O of n runtime. Then I made another loop, the same runtime. You subtract the value by 1 for each key that has a letter from the word balloon, and if the value ever falls below 0, then return false. And I was very happy to see that it passes all test cases. So then I decided to check out Master Greg's solution to see the most optimal solution. His solution is way faster and it uses 2 cool tricks that I'll talk about at the end of this video. The next question I did was 2sum. I get an array, I get a target integer, I have to return the indices for the numbers that can add up to the target if there are any. The idea behind my solution was pretty simple. First, I made a dictionary for the array where the key was each number from the array itself. Value is the index. Then I made another loop where I iterated through each key. I subtracted it from the target value and got the leftover and saw if the leftover was already in the dictionary but in a different index, and it passes all test cases and I'm pretty proud. Next, I decided to do some questions from LeetCode. He is also another great master but a bit less aura than Greg. Able to finish has duplicates with a simple hash map. Next, I finally decided to move on to mediums. First one I did was group in anagrams, where you find an anagrams and then you have to group them as well. And all of the ideas that I was drawing up just didn't seem efficient, so I decided to just look at the answer. And well, okay, to solve this question efficiently, you need to first abuse the constraint that we're only dealing with 26 letters, and then make an array of each letter of the alphabet. Then make a dictionary where the key is the array itself, the value is the letter. And this question really opened my mind after learning these two tricks. This question I did was longest sequence. We're given an array, you find the longest sequence, and then you print. This question was frustrating at first because I spent 40 minutes just coming up with an idea. Then after thinking really hard, I remembered that mathematical strategy I had to come up. And then a bit later, I figured that in order to identify the start of a sequence, you need to make sure that it doesn't have the integer that comes before it. Then let's start counting the sequence until we reach the end. And that is a very messy solution, but it passes all test cases. Okay, now trying to be humble, after solving a medium by myself, I moved to encode and decode, where I have to encode a string and then decode it. Question's a little vague as to what it exactly wants us to encode it to, so I just assumed that if I encode it to the number that represents its place in the alphabet, that should be fine. So when I was planning it out, I was converting each letter to numbers, ASCII, and so on, until I realized I need to actually detect how long a word actually is. Now, I found that out pretty early on, but I feel like I should have been able to see that earlier on. So in my encoded string, I always first put in the length of every word, and then after that I put the numeric value of each letter, ended by a dot. Then to decode, I first take the first number to see how big the word is, and then I make it detect every letter until it reaches a dot to understand the letter, and it keeps going for the number of dots it's supposed to, as it found out from the very first number. And that works great, and it passes the first two test cases, and I was really happy until I tried all the other test cases and my code does not work for when the length of a word is more than 9, since I didn't have a delimiter after the length. Next, I tried valid Sudoku, where it gives you a Sudoku grid, and you just have to verify that it is an actual Sudoku grid with the rules of Sudoku. You only have to do this with the numbers that are shown. So my mathematical strategy I had going into this was I just have to check each column once, see if there's any repeated numbers, and use a hash table for that. So yeah, just checking if any value in the dictionary is equal or greater than 2 and is not a dot. If so, return false. And this did work for the first two test cases again, which I'm happy, but it failed some of the other edge cases, specifically ones where you use a Sudoku grid which is bigger than 9 by 9, which makes no sense because a Sudoku grid is never usually can't be above 9 by 9, but okay. So I think I really just need to think carefully about, really carefully about the edge cases for these medium hash map questions. Other than that, I'll wrap this video up and talk about what I learned. Here you can see all of the valuable lessons I learned, tricks, tactics, common patterns. Feel free to pause or take a screenshot. But yeah, I'll spend the rest of my week trying to really polish up on these mediums and focusing on these edge cases. The next part of the series will either show me polishing up my skills for hash maps and arrays, or it'll move into 2-pointers and stacks, or I might practice interview questions, or even start a hellhole called operating systems.
Let me ask you this, you know what a shared pointer is?
So yeah, please subscribe if you'd like to see any of that. Please, I really need friends. And like if you found this video helpful. Till then, peace, wish you all good luck.